The stellar horizon hung in Earth's orbit like a giant silver disk, its smooth surface reflecting the blue and green planet below. Inside the ship, 5 alien researchers moved about their stations with a mix of excitement and nervous energy. They had traveled across multiple star systems to study Earth, a planet that had become something of a mystery in the Galactic Academic Consortium. Jae-sung, the lead researcher, stood at the main viewing window. His green eyes scanned the planet's surface, watching continents shift and clouds swirl. He was tall, even for his species, with skin the color of pale stone and fingers that ended in delicate points. Behind him, the other researchers prepared for their first ground mission. Sung-min, the youngest of the team, checked his equipment for the 100th time. As the junior entomologist, he had the most to prove. His hands moved quickly, attaching sensors to his protective suit, carefully adjusting each piece of technology that would keep him safe on the strange planet below. Nervous? Asked Hai-jin, the team's toxicology expert. She stood nearby, her own equipment already perfectly arranged. Her voice was calm, but Sung-min could see a slight tremor in her fingers. Not nervous, Sung-min replied, trying to sound confident. Just careful. We've studied Earth's data for years, but this is our first actual contact. Dongwoo, their security specialist, said nothing. He was busy checking the weapons that he hoped they would never need to use. At nearly 3 meters tall, he was a mountain of muscle and genetic engineering, designed to protect the research team from any potential threats. The 5th member of their team, Jin-ho, worked at the communication station. As their cultural expert, he had spent years studying human languages, behaviors, and social structures. His screens were filled with data about Earth's most recent global communications, weather patterns, and social media trends. Preparation complete, Jae-sung announced. His voice was deep and carried the weight of leadership. We will make our first landing in the forest region of what humans call the Pacific Northwest. Satellite scans show it's an area with high biodiversity and minimal human interference. Sung-min's heart raced. Every researcher in the Galactic Consortium dreamed of discovering something new, something that would change their understanding of life in the universe. Earth had been a puzzle for decades. Unlike other planets they had studied, this one seemed to break all the usual rules of planetary development. The landing shuttle was a marvel of alien technology. It moved silently through Earth's atmosphere, its advanced cloaking systems ensuring that no human would detect their arrival. Trees rushed past the windows, massive green giants that seemed to touch the sky. The forest floor was a complex carpet of moss, fallen leaves, and hidden life. Scanning for potential research sites, Jin-ho called out. His fingers danced across holographic displays, mapping out the most interesting areas of their landing zone. Hai-jin leaned forward, her scientific curiosity burning bright. The biological diversity is incredible, she muttered. Look at the number of microorganisms in just 1 square meter of soil. The shuttle touched down in a small clearing. For a moment, everything was silent. Then Jae-sung spoke. Atmospheric conditions stable. Radiation levels normal. Biological containment protocols activated. Sung-min was the first to step out. His boots made soft sounds against the forest floor. Everywhere he looked, life moved. Insects crawled between leaves. Tiny plants pushed up through the rich soil. Birds called in the distance. He had no idea that just meters away, something tiny was watching. Something that would change everything they thought they knew about life, survival, and the true meaning of danger. The morning light filtered through the forest canopy, creating a soft green world of shadows and movement. Sung-min knelt carefully, his scientific scanner moving slowly across the forest floor. Every tiny creature fascinated him. Beetles crawled between leaves. Moss grew in soft patches. Tiny plants pushed up through dark soil. Amazing, he whispered to himself. Hai-jin stood nearby, her own scanner working quickly. She was looking for something specific. Unusual chemical compounds, unique biological structures, anything that might be interesting to their research team. Her eyes moved carefully over every inch of the ground. Suddenly, Sung Min's hand stopped. Something small moved between two fallen leaves. At first, he thought it was nothing. But then he looked closer. A spider. Not just any spider, but the smallest spider he had ever seen. "Dr. Hai-Jin," he called softly. "Come look at this." Hai-Jin moved quickly. Her scanner focused on the tiny creature. It was smaller than her smallest fingernail, barely visible against the dark forest floor. Its legs were thin like tiny threads. Its body was so small that most researchers would have missed it completely. "Incredible," Hai-Jin muttered. Jae-sung approached, his tall frame blocking some of the forest light. "What have you found?" Sung Min pointed. "A spider. Extremely small. Probably a species not yet documented in our databases." The spider didn't move much. It seemed to be waiting. Its tiny body was perfectly still, almost like it was watching them. Sung Min felt a strange feeling. Something about this tiny creature seemed different. Dongwoo, their security specialist, looked unimpressed. "It's just a small insect," he said. His voice was deep and low. "Probably harmless." But Hai-Jin was not listening. Her scanner was working overtime, collecting data about the tiny creature. Her face changed. Something in the scanner's readings made her stop. "This is not normal," she said quietly. Jae-sung leaned closer. "Explain." Hai-Jin's hands moved quickly over her scanner. Numbers and graphs appeared on her screen. "The chemical composition of this creature is unlike anything we've seen before. Its body contains complex molecular structures that do not match any known spider species in our universal database." Sung Min felt excitement building. As a young researcher, discovering a new species would be a major achievement. Should we capture it for further study? Hai-Jin hesitated. Something in her scientific mind was sending warning signals. "Not yet," she said. "We need to understand more." The spider remained still. Its tiny body seemed to be watching them, waiting. Jin Ho, their cultural expert, joined the group. In human literature, he said, small creatures are often more dangerous than they appear. They have many stories about tiny things that can cause big problems. Dongwoo laughed. He was the team's strongest member, genetically designed for combat and protection. "A tiny spider, dangerous, to me." But Hai-Jin was not listening. Her scanner continued to collect data. Something was different about this spider, something important. The forest around them continued its quiet life. Leaves moved in soft winds, small creatures crawled between plants, and the tiny spider remained perfectly still, watching the alien researchers with something that almost looked like patience. No one noticed the way its tiny legs seemed to twitch. No one saw the almost invisible droplet of liquid forming at the tip of its hidden fangs. Something was about to change. Something big was coming. The research lab inside the stellar horizon was a world of white and silver. Clean surfaces reflected bright lights. Complex machines hummed with quiet energy. In the center of this perfect space, the tiny spider sat inside a special container. Hai-Jin worked carefully. Her hands moved slowly, checking every detail. Sung Min watched her, his young face full of curiosity. They had brought the spider back to their ship for study, and now something strange was happening. "Look at these molecular structures," Hai-Jin said. Her voice was serious. "This is not a normal spider." Sung Min leaned closer. The spider looked so small. Its body was barely bigger than a drop of water. How could something so tiny be interesting? Jin Ho entered the lab. As the team's cultural expert, he often brought interesting information about Earth. "Humans have many stories about small things," he said. "They say that size does not matter when it comes to danger." Dongwoo, who had been standing in the corner, laughed. His big body seemed too large for the careful research space. "A tiny spider, dangerous, to me." He flexed his muscles. Each muscle was designed by the best genetic engineers in their civilization. He was a perfect fighting machine. Jae-sung, The team leader watched carefully. His green eyes studied the spider. Something about this creature was different. Something was not normal. Hai-Jin's scanner made a soft beeping sound. Numbers and strange graphs appeared on her screen. "The venom structure is unlike anything in our database," she said. "Look at these molecular chains." Sung Min looked. To him, the graphs looked like complicated puzzles. Lines twisted and turned. Colors changed from blue to red to green. "What does it mean?" he asked. "It means," Hai-Jin said slowly, "that this small spider has a weapon more powerful than we can understand." The spider sat still in its container. Its tiny body did not move, but something about it seemed to be watching, waiting. Jin-Ho brought up images on another screen, pictures of Earth's forests, pictures of similar spiders. "On Earth," he explained, "there are many small creatures that can be very dangerous. Humans live with them every day." Dongwu looked unimpressed. He had fought in many battles. He had faced creatures from different planets. A tiny spider meant nothing to him. "We need more tests," Jae-sung said. His voice was calm, but something in his tone told everyone that this was important. Hai-Jin prepared a special test device. It was designed to study dangerous biological materials. The spider would be placed inside. Sensors would measure everything about its body and its possible weapons. Some men watched with excitement. This was why he became a researcher, to discover new things, to learn about life in the universe. The lab was quiet. Machines hummed. Lights blinked. The spider sat still in its container. No one noticed the way its tiny legs seemed to move, just a little, just enough to show it was alive, just enough to hint that something big was about to happen. Dongwu continued to laugh. "A dangerous spider," he said again, "to me." But Hai-Jin was not laughing. Her eyes were serious. Her hands moved carefully over the scanner. Something was different about this spider, something important. The test was about to begin, and nobody knew what would happen next. The test room was quiet. Special protective walls covered every surface. Bright lights made everything look white and clean. In the center of the room, a single container held the tiny spider. Hai-Jin checked her equipment one more time. Her hands moved carefully over control panels. Some men watched from behind a thick glass wall. His young face was full of excitement and worry. "Preparing first test sequence," Hai-Jin announced. Jae-sung stood next to her. His green eyes watched everything. "Be careful," he said softly. The first test was simple. They would release a small robotic probe near the spider. This probe was made of strong metal. It could survive extreme conditions. Most small creatures would not be able to damage it. The probe moved slowly. Its metal legs touched the container's floor. The spider did not move. Some men leaned closer to the glass. "Is something wrong?" he asked. Jin-Ho, who was watching the screens, shook his head. "No," he said. "The spider is just waiting." Suddenly, everything changed. The spider moved faster than anyone could see. One moment it was still. The next moment, it was on the probe. Its tiny body seemed to flow like liquid metal. The probe stopped working. Hai-Jin's eyes went wide. "Impossible," she whispered. Dongwu laughed from the back of the room. A small spider broke a special probe. Impossible. But the screen showed everything. The spider had not just touched the probe. It had completely destroyed it. Complex metal parts lay broken. Chemical sensors showed strange reactions. "Run a full analysis," Jae-sung said. Hai-Jin's fingers moved over the controls. Numbers and graphs appeared on multiple screens. Each number told a strange story. The spider's bite had broken down the probe's metal structure in seconds. Not just broken, completely destroyed. "This is not normal," Hai-Jin said. Her voice was calm, but something else was there. Fear. Shungmin could not look away. The tiny spider sat in the middle of the broken probe. It looked so small, so harmless. Jin-Ho brought up more information about Earth spiders. Humans know about dangerous spiders, he explained. They have special names for them. Some can kill quickly. Dongwu stopped laughing. The next test would be more serious. They would use a special biological model, something that could show how the spider's venom might work on living tissue. The team prepared carefully. Protective suits, special shields, every possible safety measure. The spider waited. Its tiny body did not move, but something about it seemed to be watching, waiting. Hai-Jin took a deep breath. Preparing second test sequence, she said. Jae-sung watched the screens. Something was different about this creature. Something important. Sung-min felt excitement and fear mix in his stomach. What would happen next? The lab was quiet. Machines hummed softly. Lights blinked. The spider sat still. But not for long. The second test was different. This time, they used a special biological model. It looked like a living thing, but it was not alive. Scientists had made it to test dangerous substances. The model had layers that copied living tissue. It could show exactly what would happen if something dangerous touched it. Dongwu watched from the side of the room. His big muscles seemed to fill the space. He did not believe a tiny spider could be dangerous. Not to him. Not to anyone. Hai-Jin prepared the test carefully. Her hands moved over control panels. Sung-min watched from behind the thick glass wall. His young face was full of worry and excitement. Starting test sequence, she said. The biological model lay in the special container. Next to it, the tiny spider waited. So small, so quiet. The first touch happened quickly. Nobody expected what came next. The spider moved faster than any camera could record. One moment it was still. The next moment, it was on the biological model. Lights on the control panel went crazy. Numbers appeared and disappeared. Graphs showed strange changes happening very fast. What is happening? Jae-sung asked. Hai-Jin's eyes were wide. The venom, she whispered. It's breaking down the biological model at the molecular level. Sung-min leaned closer to the glass. Explain, he said. Jin-ho looked at the screens. It's like the spider is taking the model apart. Not just hurting it, but completely destroying its structure. The biological model started to change. Its layers broke down. Complex structures fell apart. What should have taken hours happened in seconds. Dongwu stopped laughing. Impossible, he said, but his voice was not sure anymore. The spider sat in the middle of what was left. Its tiny body did not look different, but something about it seemed powerful, dangerous. Hai-Jin's scanner made strange sounds. The venom, she said, is unlike anything in our database. It does not just hurt. It completely breaks down living structures. Jae-sung watched carefully. His green eyes saw everything. We need more tests, he said. Sung-min felt scared and excited. This was why he became a researcher, to find new things, to learn about life in the universe. The team talked quietly. What did this mean? How could something so small be so dangerous? Jin-ho brought up more information about Earth. Humans live with dangerous creatures, he said. They know how to protect themselves. They understand that small things can be very powerful. Dongwu looked at the spider. For the first time, he looked worried. We need to test this on something stronger, he said. Jae-sung nodded. Prepare the next test, he told Hai-Jin. The next test would be different. They would use something closer to a living creature, something that could show exactly how dangerous this tiny spider could be. The lab was quiet. Machines hummed softly. Lights blinked. The spider waited. Its tiny body did not move, but something about it seemed to be thinking, planning. Something big was going to happen, and nobody knew what would come next. Dongwu stood in the special testing room. His body was covered in the strongest protective gear they had. Layers of metal and special chemicals covered every part of him. He was the team's strongest member. No small creature could harm him. This is stupid, he said, but something in his voice was not sure. Jae-sung watched from the control room. Hai-jin checked her equipment one more time. Sung-min pressed his face against the thick glass wall. His breath made small clouds on the surface. Releasing the spider, Hai-jin announced. The tiny spider dropped into the testing area. It looked so small next to Dongwoo, like a tiny dot of black against his huge body. Nobody moved. The spider waited. For a moment, nothing happened. Then everything changed. The spider moved faster than anyone could see. One moment it was on the floor. The next moment, it was on Dongwoo's protective suit. Alarms started to sound. "Something is happening," Sung-min shouted. Jin-ho watched the screens. Numbers and graphs showed strange things. Chemical reactions, molecular changes. The spider's tiny body seemed to do something impossible. It was eating through Dongwoo's protective suit. Layer by layer, the special protective gear started to break down. Chemical sensors went crazy. Protective shields began to fail. "Impossible," Dongwoo said, but his voice was not strong anymore. Hai-jin's hands moved over the controls. "The venom," she said. "It's breaking down molecular structures faster than we can understand." Sung-min watched in shock. The spider was smaller than his finger, but it was destroying something that should be unbreakable. Jae-sung's green eyes watched everything. "Remove the spider," he said quickly. But it was too late. Dongwoo's protective suit was falling apart. The spider moved quickly. Its tiny body seemed to be everywhere at the same time. "Emergency protocols," Jae-sung shouted. The room's special shields began to close. Protective walls moved to contain whatever was happening. Dongwoo could not move. The spider was too fast. Jin-ho brought up more information about Earth. "Humans know about small things," he said. "They understand that size does not matter when it comes to survival." Hai-jin's scanner made strange sounds. "The venom is breaking down everything," she said. "Not just materials, but the very structure of living things." Sung-min felt scared and excited. This was why he became a researcher, to find new things, to learn about life in the universe. The spider continued its work. Dongwoo's protective suit was almost gone. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. A tiny spider, destroying their strongest warrior. The lab was quiet, except for the sounds of alarms, except for the strange sounds of something breaking down. The spider waited. Its tiny body did not look different, but something about it seemed powerful, very powerful. Something big was happening, and nobody knew how to stop it. The medical room was quiet. Special lights made everything look white and clean. Dongwoo lay on a special bed. Medical machines blinked and made soft sounds. He was alive, but not the same. Hai-jin looked at her scanner. Her hands moved slowly over the control panels. Sung-min stood next to her. His young face was very serious. "What happened?" Jae-sung asked. Hai-jin took a deep breath. "The spider's venom," she said, "did something impossible." The medical screen showed strange images. Dongwoo's body was changing at the molecular level. His strong muscles were breaking down. His special genetic improvements were falling apart. Sung-min looked closer. "How is this possible?" he asked. Jin-ho brought up more information about Earth. "Humans have many small creatures that can be very dangerous," he explained. "They know that size does not matter when it comes to survival." The spider sat in a special container. So small, so quiet. Nobody could understand how something so tiny could do so much damage. "The venom," Hai-jin said, "is not just a weapon. It is a complete destruction system." Jae-sung watched carefully. His green eyes saw everything. "Explain," he said. Hai-jin's scanner made more strange sounds. "The venom breaks down living structures," she said. "Not just hurts, but completely destroys them." At the molecular level, Dongwoo tried to move, but he could not. The spider's venom had changed everything about him. Sung-min felt scared and excited. This was why he became a researcher, to find new things, to learn about life in the universe. The team talked quietly. What did this mean? How could something so small be so dangerous? We cannot bring this information back to our home world, Jae-sung said. They will not believe us. Jin-ho nodded. Humans have a saying, he said. Looks can be deceiving. The medical machines continued to work. Dongwoo's body continued to change. The spider waited in its container. Its tiny body did not look different, but something about it seemed powerful, very powerful. Hai-jin continued to study her scanner. The venom, she said, is a perfect weapon. It does not just hurt, it completely destroys. Sung-min looked at the spider. So small, so quiet. What do we do now? He asked. Jae-sung looked at the spider, then at Dongwoo, then back at the spider. We learn, he said. We understand. The medical room was quiet. Machines hummed softly. Lights blinked. The spider waited. Its tiny body did not move, but something about it seemed to be thinking, planning. Something big had happened, and nobody knew what would come next. The stellar horizon hung in space above Earth. Inside the ship, the research team sat in a special meeting room. Something big had changed. Jae-sung looked at his team. His green eyes were serious. We cannot report what we found, he said. Sung-min looked confused. But why? He asked. Hai-jin explained. If we tell our homeworld about this spider, they will want to destroy Earth. They will see humans as a threat. Jin-ho nodded. Humans live with these creatures every day, he said. They do not even think about how dangerous they can be. The tiny spider sat in a special container in the center of the room. So small, so quiet. Dongwoo sat in a special chair. He was not the same strong warrior anymore. The spider's venom had changed everything about him. His strong body was now weak. His special genetic improvements were gone. We learned something important, Jae-sung said. Size does not matter when it comes to survival. Sung-min looked at the spider. It was smaller than his finger, but it had destroyed their strongest warrior. It had shown how powerful a small creature could be. What will we do? Sung-min asked. Jae-sung looked at each team member. We will keep this a secret, he said. We will protect Earth from our own people. The room was quiet. Jin-ho brought up more information about Earth. Humans have many stories, he said. Stories about small things doing big things, about unexpected heroes. Hai-jin's scanner made soft sounds. She was still studying the spider. The venom is a perfect survival tool, she said. It is not just a weapon. It is a way of protecting itself. The spider did not move, but something about it seemed to be watching, waiting. Sung-min felt excited and scared. This was why he became a researcher, to find new things, to learn about life in the universe. We will tell our people that Earth is not ready for contact, Jae-sung said. We will protect them from our own civilization. Dongwoo tried to speak. His voice was weak now. The spider, he said. So small. Nobody laughed anymore. The team understood something important. Small things can be very powerful. Size does not matter when it comes to survival. The stellar horizon moved slowly. Earth looked blue and green below them. So beautiful, so full of life. Jin-ho looked at the screens. Humans live with these creatures, he said again. They do not even know how special they are. Hai-jin continued to study her scanner. The spider's venom was a perfect system, a perfect way to survive. Sung-min looked at the spider. So small, so quiet. Jae-sung made the final decision. We go home, he said. We protect Earth's secret. The ship moved through space. Quiet, calm. The spider waited in its container. Its tiny body did not move, but something about it seemed powerful, very powerful. Something big had happened, and nobody outside this room would ever know.